Hi everyone. Tonight we step onto the vast frozen plains of North America. You can feel the wind sting your cheeks, sharp like a knife. Your boots crunch through deep snow, snow that seems to swallow your legs. Every breath is so cold, it feels like tiny pieces of glass in your throat. You stand in this huge empty world of white and grey, and you wonder, how did anyone sleep here out, without turning into ice by morning? The truth is you probably would not last this night, not without some smart tricks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. I would love to know where you are watching from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights. Your eyes adjust to the dark horizon, where the snow meets the sky. The whole world is quiet under its blanket. No noise from cars, no glow from cities. Only the sound of wind moving over the flat land. A line of smoke rises in the distance, fighting the weather, and you find yourself walking toward it. Each step feels heavier than the last. Your breath frosts your eyelashes, but you keep moving toward that small promise of warmth. You think of the people who lived here long ago, people who knew the cold well, yet still built homes homes that made this frozen place livable. The snow creaks under your boots with every step. Your ears hurt from the icy wind. In your mind you see their history. Whole nations of Native Americans who lived through winters harder than this. One thing often forgotten is how smart their shelters were. Not just simple tents, but careful designs of hide wood fire, tested by many generations. People who could not afford to fail. Mainstream history tells us that thick layers of buffalo hide were a key shield against the wind, better than the thin canvas Europeans later used. This was not a small detail. It was life or death. You stop and look at the thin smoke ahead and think of a curious fact. Some tribes spread mud or clay on the outer hides when storms were very bad. This made a crust that froze solid, like a natural plaster. It seemed strange to add wet material in below-zero weather, but this hard shell worked as insulation, similar to a primitive igloo wall. This kind of change reminds you that being clever was not a choice you rose. It was the only way to live. As you keep walking, the air feels thin, or maybe your chest is tight from the effort. The wind keeps asking the same question. How do you last a night in this? Experts still wonder if these shelters alone were warm enough, without always having a shared fire. Some say the tents were too drafty, that people relied on being close together. Others say the design itself was very effective, with angled walls and tight seams. The truth is likely in between, a mix of good building and shared strength. You let your imagination go further, picturing how your own body would want warmth now. If you had to spend the night, you would shiver until you were exhausted. Your teeth would chatter loudly, and your muscles would give up. That is the reality of the cold. Your body cannot win against nature without smart tools, and it is here in this huge open space that you see how amazing it was for native peoples not just to live, but to do well here, to raise children, hold ceremonies, laugh and dream, while the wind outside tried to get into their homes. The smoke trail looks bigger now, clearer, thicker, a sign of life against the odds. You picture a circle of tents, their pointed tops rising from the snow, like strong weeds in a frozen lake, each one a signal of survival, each one full of stories you can almost hear it. If you close your eyes, imagine stepping closer. Your frozen boots crunch softly. You hear the distant bark of a dog, the faint cry of a baby wrapped in fur. The outside world is cruel, but inside those hide walls, there is light, heat and human strength. For a moment you just stand there, your breath drifting out in clouds, and you think the first rule of surviving the night is to always move toward the fire. The tents ahead promise more answers, but for now you hold on to this thought. Clever hands, clever hearts and strong will turned this impossible play into a place where people could lie down at night, close their eyes and truly rest. You step closer now, boots sinking into the deep snow. The wind whistles around your ears. The trail of smoke gets thicker. Soon you see the outline of a small village. Tipis gathered in a circle, like guards against the wild plain. Each structure stands strong, tall, and purposeful, its hide covering pulled tight over wooden poles that reach up into the sky. You feel invited, as if the circle itself says, "Come inside, traveler. You do not belong out there." Winter villages were not placed at random. They were often built in a circle, with openings arranged carefully, so the strong winds could not blow straight through. Mainstream historians note, this circular plan was not just spiritual, it was practical. The design let families protect each other, their tipis facing the storm as one group, not as separate weak shelters. As you walk into that circle, you see how snow is piled high against the outer walls, making a natural buffer that makes the inside world a little less harsh. A curious little detail comes to mind. In some winter camps, people let snow pile up on purpose against the lower edges of the hides. Instead of always digging it away, they knew snow could act like a thick blanket. The drifts became extra walls, quieting the roar of the wind outside. It is a clever trick, using the very thing that freezes you as a shield to keep you alive. You can almost hear an elder smiling, telling your child, the snow is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is a friend. Yet experts still discuss how much of this was planned, and how much was just adapting to the weather. Did native builders design their villages to use the drifting snow, or did they just make the best of condition? There are arguments on both sides. Some archaeologists say the layouts show careful planning. Others say the proof is not clear enough. You stand in the middle of the circle and feel that unanswered question, like a whisper on the wind. Planning or quick thinking, the scene around you gets clearer. Dogs run between tents, leaving tracks in the snow. Children's laughter floats on the cold air, muffled by the fur they wear. From far away, it is easy to romanticize. But if you stepped inside with modern lungs, you would feel the sharp edge of survival, always at your back. No one here could let their guard down completely. The tents were close together, not just for warmth but for safety. At night wolves might come near, enemy raiders might test the camp, and the circle itself, holding the people like clasped hands, became both shield and symbol. You notice how each tipi entrance faces slightly away from the wind, never directly into the storm. You picture families ducking inside, brushing off snow, stomping their moccasins before slipping in. And you see that even the smallest detail, direction, placement, order, was part of the survival game. Nothing here was casual. Your imagination fills in the gaps. You see women tightening the cords that hold the hides in place, checking for gaps where wind might sneak in. Men carry wood, shoulders bent under frozen logs, cut from far-off river groves. All the while smoke keeps rising. The life of the camp. Inside every home a fire glows like a heartbeat. Together these little fires make a pattern of warmth against the night. Step by step you walk through the camp. You hear low voices, smell roasted meat mixed with smoke, feel the cold weaken as the walls close around you. This circle is no accident. It is building born from need, born from memory, passed down from countless winters before. You almost envy the certainty of these people, who knew exactly where to put a home when the world outside was trying to end them. For a moment you look up. The poles of each home pierce the sky like skeletal fingers. Snowflakes spiral down between them. You realize that here in this circle, you are not just safe from the storm. You are inside a story, one that goes back centuries. You walk among people who turned only hides, wood and will into survival. The circle holds you in for tonight. You belong. You bend at the entrance of one home, brushing snow from your shoulders, and slip inside. At once the world changes. The scream of the wind becomes a dull quiet. The cold weakens As if it cannot find you, he erupts you here. Instead, you are met by a darkness that feels alive. A womb-like space made from hides, warmed by firelight. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the dim glow at the center. Flames moving upward, smoke curling slowly through the hole above. The air smells of wood smoke and leather, with a faint sharp smell of pine resin. You feel it cling to your current clothes, the way all who lived here would carry that scent. There is softness underfoot too. Rush mats of furs spread over the frozen ground keep you from touching bare earth. You let yourself sit down, feeling how the hides soak up sound, how the layers soften the roar outside into something distant and almost manageable. Mainstream accounts call the central fire the heart of every home, a constant presence. It was not just for cooking, it was survival. The fire warmed, yes, but it also controlled moisture, drying hides and keeping bedding usable through long months of frost. Archaeologists have found layers of burnt earth at old campsites, proof of fires that burned for weeks or months. Without that central flame, the home would become damp, cold, unlivable. A more curious little fact comes to mind. Early European visitors sometimes complained that the smoke inside made their eyes water so badly they could hardly breathe, yet the families living here did not seem bothered. Some experts think they just got used to it, their lungs toughened by years of breathing with smoke. Others say clever placement of smoke holes, adjusted with each gust of wind, worked better than outsiders knew. Either way, you picture yourself squinting through haze, while the people around you laugh at your watery eyes. It is a quirky detail. You suffer, they live well, and still there is disagreement. Anthropologists still argue over how good these smoke holes were at managing air. Were they wonders of design, carefully placed for the wind, or were they just constant problems, letting in drafts as much as they let out smoke? The proof is hard to find. You tilt your head back, looking at the thin shaft of light, when the smoke drifts up, and feel the weight of that unanswered question pressing on your chest along with the haze. Yet, even with a sting in your eyes, you cannot deny the coziness of this space. Around you, families sit close. Children curl up under fur blankets, their soft breathing mixing with the crackle of flames. You hear the shuffle of a woman adjusting hides at the entrance, pulling them tighter against a new gust outside. A man pokes the fire, sending sparks upward. The air warms enough for you to relax your shoulders. The cold is still eerie, but softened, kept away by a fragile balance of fire and fur. Your senses take over. The hiss of sap as a log burns, the rustle of skins overhead, the low murmur of voices sharing words you cannot catch. You realize that for the people who lived this life, the home was not just a shelter. It was a cocoon where the outside world could not reach. In the middle of endless blizzards, inside this dim circle of light, life felt possible. And maybe that is the secret, you think, as you look into the fire. Survival here was not about beating winter. It was about bending the season to your will, creating small worlds where you could close your eyes, breathe through the smoke, and actually sleep. You curl deeper into the fur's eyelids heavy, and see that this home, with its darkness, its warmth, and its never-ending fire, makes the impossible feel almost comfortable. The longer you sit inside, the more your eyes adjust. The glow of the flames sharpens details around you. You see the walls' thick layers of buffalo hide, sewn tight together, stretched over poles, heavy enough that the wind outside rattles, but does not break through. The hides move a little when a stronger gust pushes against them, but mostly they stand firm, like the walls of a fortress, made from flesh and fiber, not stone. Mainstream historians often remind us that buffalo hides were the life of plains peoples. They were clothing, food, tools, and here they were insulation. Each winter, whole communities worked hard to prepare new hides, scraping and softening them until they could be sewn into huge coverings. A single tipi might need 14 buffalo skins, sewn with sinew so tight The scenes themselves worked as barriers to the cold. The result was not perfect, but it trapped warmth like a modern winter coat. You lean closer, fingertips brushing the inside wall. The hide feels stiff cool at first, but you see it is thick, much thicker than anything in modern tents. The texture is rough where it is not smooth, but solid, and you think of a quirky little note from old journals. In the deepest winters, some families doubled their coverings, draping extra hides over the outside like big blankets. Visitors said the homes looked bulky and lopsided, but those double walls created a thermal cocoon, even if it made the structures harder to move later. You imagine the homes walking across the plains, like giant buffalo when it was time to move. Still, experts debate whether these buffalo hide coverings were as draft-proof as stories say. Some researchers say smoke-blackened hide became stiff and cracked, leaving gaps for icy air. Others say skilled women always maintained them, replacing panels, patching holes, tightening cords, so the homes stayed strong. The question stays, were these tents warm havens by design, or did they need constant care to keep the cold out? The fire flickers, and you watch how its light dances across the scenes. The shadows show how carefully each piece is joined, an art as much as a need. You picture women sewing by lamplight, shiny thread pulled tight with practiced hands, children sleeping beside them as the work goes on. This was not decoration. It was survival sewn into every line. The sound inside deepens. The wind still drums softly on the outside hides, a muffled beat that never quite stops. But within the layered walls the sound feels distant, like a storm you have locked out. You realize that every layer of hide is not just a physical barrier, it is mental armor. It lets families lie down at night with at least a little sense of safety. Without it you would spend the whole night jumping at every icy gust, never sleeping at all. You lean back wrapped in furs and follow the thought further. Imagine stepping outside into a snow-covered plain at midnight. The wind claws, the stars blaze cold above. Your body screams to go back inside. Now imagine slipping back and pressing the entrance shut and feeling the thick hide close around you, like a protective hand. That contrast, death inches away, warmth within reach, is the heart of this life. And so you understand buffalo hides were not just fabric stretched over poles. They were the line between life and death, as vital as breath itself. Each time the wind rattles the walls, you hear them answer back steady and strong. And as you drift closer to sleep, the hides hum with their own message. We hold, we endure. We keep the night outside where it belongs. You move along, sinking deeper into the home, and notice something small below you. The bedding is not flat on the earth. It rises a little, as if the floor has a soft mound. Your fingers brush the edge, and you see the sleeping platforms are raised above the frozen ground. In a world where every bit of heat mattered, this small detail made the difference between shivering all night and actually resting. Mainstream historians often say that many plains and woodland tribes built bedding frames from willow or other bendy branches, tied together to make low cots. On these families piled furs, grasses, or woven mats, keeping their bodies from lying right on icy soil. Cold comes up endlessly from the ground, stealing warmth faster than any draft from above. And these raised beds were simple, clever defenses. If you have ever camped without a sleeping pad, you know that feeling. The cold ground does not just chill you, it steals from you. There is an odd little fact about how people sometimes line their platforms with fresh cut cedar or pine branches, not only for cushioning but for smell. Imagine drifting to sleep wrapped in fur, your nose filled with the sharp smell of evergreen. Some accounts even say the smell was thought protective, almost spiritual, keeping away illness and bad dreams. A curious mix of practicality and belief. You do not just want warmth, you want comfort for the spirit too. And yet experts still argue about how common these raised beds were. Were they standard in all winter homes, or treats for those with enough resources? Some anthropologists think only certain tribes built them. Others think many used them. The truth is not clear, and the archaeological trace bits of wood, patches of matting, does not always last the centuries. So use it. You're wondering if you're resting on a common bed of the time or on something a little more special. The feel of it is convincing though. You shift your weight and the woven frame bends a little, creaking like an old chair. The firelight flickers across the platform, catching the outlines of thick layered furs. You can almost imagine a family curled up here, children tucked between parents. A grandmother speaking softly, everyone packed close, not just for warmth but for comfort. Above them the smoke spirals slowly. Below them the cold waits, unable to break through the simple magic of willow rods and layered hide. Your senses pull you deeper. The fur under your hand is dense and soft, maybe wolf or bear, still carrying the faint animal smell. The air is warm enough that you can relax your jaw, stop clenching against the chill. You listen to the fire's low crackle, feel the rise of heat drifting up, and see how cleverly all the parts work together. The hides above, the bedding below, and you in between, wrapped up safe from the ice. It is easy to forget how fragile that balance is. If the bedding rots from damp, if the fire goes out, if the hides tear, the cold will return in a heartbeat. But for now, you're inside this winter home. The raised platform feels like a small throne of survival. It lifts you not just above the ground, but above the constant fear of freezing. And as you ease yourself back looking into the firelight, you realize the lesson hidden in these wooden frames. Sometimes the simplest lift, just a hand's width above the ground, is what keeps you alive through the longest, darkest nights. You lean back on that raised platform, pulling the nearest covering over your chest, and feel the heavy weight of fur settle around you. It is not a blanket in the modern sense. It is a quilt of animal skins sewn together, each piece holding the warmth of an animal that once walked these same plains. By sunder, elk, even fox, layer upon layer trapping air, the way modern sleeping bags do, only heavier, more primal. The feeling is immediate. The cold pulls back, chased from your skin, and you sink into a cocoon, thick enough to quiet the outside world. Historians point out that winter bedding in native homes was a complex art, not just a pile of hides. Women often sewed fur into patchwork blankets, their stitches as careful as those used to make the home itself. These coverings were prized possessions, sometimes passed down through families, and they were as central to survival as the fire. When explorers first described them, they were amazed at the sheer amount. Piles of fur so deep a person could vanish beneath, warm enough to last nights when frost nights reached into the very marrow of the bones. But there is also a quirky little footnote here. Some tribes did not just use fur, they layered in feathers. Goose down and duck feathers were stuffed into covers, making them softer and lighter than heavy hides. Imagine lying under a patchwork of downy quilts, the feathers rustling a little as you move. It sounds fancy, almost indulgent, and yet it was born not from luxury, but from using every resource. Every scrap had a purpose, nothing was wasted. Experts remain split on how common these feather-filled covers were. Some say only certain woodland groups with access to waterfowl could make them often. Others say trade networks carried such bedding far, meaning even a plains tipi might hold a quilt heavy with down. The records are not clear, the proof is broken. So you are left to wander tucked under this imagined quilt. Are you resting under an everyday comfort, or under the rare prize of a very well-prepared family? Your senses wander as you imagine the feel. The fur closest to your skin is soft, warmed by your body almost at once. Beneath that heavier pelt's buffalo perhaps, pressed down like a weighted blanket, reassuring in the heaviness. You breathe in the faint smell of smoke, in every fiber a perfume of survival that no washing could remove. Outside the wind hits the home, but here under your coverings the world feels distant, powerless. It strikes you too that these quilts were not just practical, they were personal. A family's story was literally sewn into them. Hunts remembered, animals honored, scraps reused from generations past. When you pulled one over yourself, you were not just wrapping in warmth, you were wrapping in memory. The hides whispered of the plains of rivers crossed, of hunts finished. They were history you could sleep on. As the fire crackles lower, you pull the covers tighter, listening to the quiet world around you. Children turning in their sleep, a baby sighing softly, someone stirring embers with a careful hand. The fur soaks up the sounds, the feather lining dulls them more, and soon you are drifting in a silence as thick as the quilts. And that is the real wonder. You see, these coverings were not just about keeping death away. They created a world soft enough, warm enough to let dreams come. They gave families the chance, not just to survive winter nights, but to actually sleep, to rest deeply enough that they could rise in the morning and face another day on the unforgiving plains. The fire in the center crackles, sending a last spray of sparks upward, and you see how fragile this warmth truly is. Without it, every fur, every hide, every feather loses its power. Heat is the lifeline, and keeping that lifeline alive through the long night, is not something left to chance. You picture the rhythm of winter nights in the home. Someone always awake, someone always tending, because the fire cannot watch itself. Mainstream historians often call this a shared duty within families or bands. Nighttime fire duty took turns, sometimes informal, sometimes with a set order. One person would wake every few hours to feed the flames, stir the embers, and make sure the smoke hole stayed clear enough. It was not glorious work. It meant rising from warm furs, blinking against smoke, fumbling for logs with fingers stiff from cold, but it kept the rest of the household safe. A fire that died overnight could mean frostbite by dawn, or worse, bodies too stiff to rise again. There is an odd, almost sweet detail you recall from some frontier accounts. Children eager to show their usefulness sometimes begged for the chance to tend the fire. Elders would allow it under watchful eyes, teaching them how to poke embers just right, how to place logs so they caught without smoking everyone out. You can imagine a child smiling proudly in the fire glow, whispering that they were keeping the whole family alive. A quirky, almost heartwarming reminder that survival was not just duty, it was also a way of learning responsibility from a young age. Yet historians still argue over a simple nagging question. How good were these constant shifts? Did fires really burn hot enough, long enough, to keep warmth through the coldest nights? Some say the hides and bedding did most of the work, with the fire more for cooking and comfort. Others insist that without careful tending, frost would creep in without mercy. The debate goes on, smoldering like the embers, unfinished but always interesting. You let yourself imagine one of those shifts. You stir in your bedding, your breath fogging in the dim air. Someone rises beside you, maybe a father, maybe an aunt, and walks quietly to the fire. The sound of logs moving is soft but reassuring. Sparks flare, shadows jump across the home walls, and warmth pushes back against the chill, seeping from the earth. You relax again, knowing someone else is watching. The watchfulness itself becomes part of the lullaby. The fire has its own personality hero. It hisses when damp wood meets heat. It roars when a log catches well. It eyes into embers when left alone too long. You can almost hear it complain when ignored, or purr when fed. Unlike every living thing, it needs caretakers. The rhythm of tending, the poke, the shift, the small breath of smoke, becomes the background music of winter nights. You lie back under your furs and let the warmth sink in. The flames, though small, give the feeling of safety, and the knowledge that someone is always rising, always feeding the fire. Let you drift towards sleep without the weight of worry. Out here on a plane that could end you with one mistake. That trust is worth more than any quilt or covering, and so you learn that survival in the home was not silent suffering. It was teamwork, watchfulness, and the quiet hum of duty shared between generations. Each log tossed on the flames was a promise whispered in the dark. We will keep you warm until morning. The fire glows steadily, but you notice another trick at play. Near the edge of the home, someone has placed smooth stones close to the flames. They lie there quietly heating in silence, gathering energy as if storing the day's sun. A little later one is lifted carefully with wooden tongs, and tucked under bedding hidden under layers of hide. At first you think it is nothing, but then you see these stones are tiny suns, placed near sleeping bodies, to give off heat through the long dark hours. Historians have said how common this practice was among native groups who lived through bitter winters. Stones, especially river rocks rounded and hardened by water, could take strong heat without cracking. Once warmed, they became steady radiators, glowing unseen under hides warming feet, keeping frostbite away. This was not just clever, it was survival in its simplest form. You did not need iron stoves or coal furnaces. You needed firestone and patience. And there is a fun, almost playful fact tied to these warm rocks. Some families wrapped them in cloth or bark before putting them into bedding. Children would sometimes treat them like pets, snuggling against their stone dogs or fire babies, laughing as the warmth came through the wrappings. Imagine drifting to sleep with a heated rock at your toes. Simple, yes, but in its own way, not so different from a modern hot water bottle. Still, archaeologists wonder how common this trick was. The lack of written records leaves room for debate. Did every winter home use heated stones? Or was it only when fuel was plenty? Some experts say wood shortage might have limited it. Others believe the sheer need for warmth made it almost universal. The arguments swirl like smoke, never quite settling. You watch in your imagination as the rocks are placed, one at the base of a bed, another near a child's cradle, another under a grandmother's mat. The warmth spreads slowly, but surely, soaking into first, softening stiff joints, easing muscles tight against the cold. The glow is invisible, yet its presence is real, a comfort that stays long after the flames burn low. The sensory detail is clear. The faint crackle as a hot stone touches damp fabric, the soft hiss of steam rising, the earthy smell released when stone meets heat. You can almost feel the contrast. I see air on your face, steady warmth at your feet. It is a rhythm of hot and cold that balances strangely well, coaxing your body toward rest. And in that moment, you see how resourceful these families were. Nothing was wasted, not even the stones from riverbanks. Everything around them, the earth, the animals, the air, was put to work, turned into a partner in survival. What feels like quick thinking is actually deep knowledge, honored through centuries of trial and memory. You settle as if the stones were under your own bedding now, radiating heat up through your body. The wind outside rattles the home. The fire burns low, and yet the warmth stays secret and steady. It is enough to let you relax, enough to let eyelids droop, and you can almost hear a quiet voice from the past saying, when the night is long, even the stones can be asked to keep you company. The fire flickers lower, stones give off their stored heat, and yet another layer of protection is working outside. You picture the snow itself piled high against the base of the home, like a white blanket put there by nature's own hand. At first it seems crazy. Snow is the enemy, the biting edge of winter. But here it becomes an ally. Pack tight the drift press against the height. Seal the base, cut off drafts, and quiet the constant howl of the wind. Historians often say that many native communities did not rush to dig snow away. Instead, they let it build, sometimes even helped it. The science is simple. Snow, when packed, holds trapped air that works as insulation. It is the same idea that makes igloos surprisingly warm inside, even though they are built from ice. By winter's deepest nights, the base of a teepee could look half buried, and yet those drifts were not a danger. They were a wall of protection. One quirky little detail comes from spoken stories, describing how children would sometimes dig into those snowbanks, making little tunnels and caves for play. Parents might tell them off for letting in too much cold, but at the same time they knew the snow itself was not a threat if respected. In fact, the muffled quiet inside such holes was oddly comforting, like being in a secret den. You imagine a child sneaking back in cheeks red, hair dusted with frost, carrying that same muffled quiet back into the home, as if it were treasure. But experts still disagree on how planned this use of snow was. Did families really plan their homes to use snowdrifts, or did they just adapt to what winter gave them? Some say the camps were placed where drifting was predictable, behind hills near riverbanks. Others believe the snowbanks were more accidental than designed. The debate stays just as the snow itself stays long after storm. Inside the home you feel the difference. The wind rattles above, but at your feet the air is still. The packed snow has become a barricade, forcing drafts to climb higher before slipping in. The sound changes too. The storm's roar outside becomes a low hum, like distant ocean waves, not an immediate attack. It is strange, almost soothing to know now. The same snow that could bury you alive is also what lets you rest. You let your senses lean into it. The muffled quiet, the way your breath seems steadier. The strange comfort of knowing walls are thickened by nature itself. Snow has turned from enemy to blanket, from killer to caretaker. You close your eyes and think of how resourceful the people you were, how they refused to see only danger in their world. Instead, they found friends in the most unlikely places, friends that would keep them alive when the night seemed endless. And so as the wind moans above and the fire burns loads, you feel the snow pressing against the home like a gentle hand. Outside it is fierce and without mercy, but here wrapped in hides and blanketed by snow, you find the quiet chance of sleep. The night grows deeper, and though the fire smoulders and the hides hold strong, the real warmth comes from something more personal. You look around the home and see how close everyone lies. Children pressed between parents, elders curled beside grandchildren, dogs tucked in at the edges, bodies making a patchwork of warmth, as effective as any fur quilt. Out here heat was shared. Survival is a group project. Historians remind us that sleeping together was not just convenient, it was necessary. A single body loses heat fast, but several pressed close create a small climate of their own. Families slept in tight clusters, breathing together, their warmth mixing and moving under heavy hides. This setup is seen across cultures, from Roman soldiers under one cloak to Arctic hunters sharing snow shelters. And in every case it works. Body heat was the cheapest, most reliable fuel available. There is a quirky little fact passed down in spoken stories. Sometimes children would be tucked between two adults, not only for comfort but as living insulation. Parents joked that the little ones were like hot stones, giving off warmth both ways. In the morning when everyone moved, laughter often broke out at how hair stuck out in wild directions. From so much closeness, you imagine the scene: sleepy smiles, a grandmother patting a grandchild's messy hair. Everyone amused that warmth could be funny too. And yet experts still argue over how common this practice was in winter homes. Some accounts describe whole extended families, 3 generations deep, all pressed into one home. Others suggest larger groups split into smaller households, for privacy, even if it meant less shared warmth. The proof is not neat, leaving room for guesswork. Was sleeping together universal, or just sometimes? Did cultural rules or weather severity decide who slept with whom? You lean into the image of such a night. The soundscape is personal. Soft breathing, occasional snores. A child's whim requited by a gentle hand. The warmth is real, not just physical but emotional. The feeling that you are never truly alone in the dark. The fire may fail, the hides may flip, but human bodies together make a sanctuary. No storm can fully break. Your own senses fill in the gaps. You feel the press of fur against your cheek, the slow rhythm of someone's chest rising beside you, the faint smell of skin warmed by smoke and animal fat. It is not glorious, but it is deeply human. The way survival often is there. In this closeness, trust is unspoken. Everybody depends on everybody else. and nobody pretends otherwise. And as you lie there, eyes heavy, you see that the warmth you feel is not just heat. It is kinship, it is memory. It is the reminder that survival is not solitary. It is shared breath, shared space, shared nights. Out here in the endless snow, the warmth of a body beside you is the difference between freezing and waking to another day. The fire burns steady, the quilts of fur hold tight, and yet your attention moves to the smallest people in the home. Babies. In a world this cold where even adults risk frostbite in minutes, how did tiny bodies last the night? You watch as a young mother lifts her baby from her side, a child wrapped tightly in layers of fur and moss, nestled into a cradle board. That is more than just a carrier. It is a tiny fortress against the cold. Mainstream historians say that cradle boards were key tools of survival. A baby tied in one was not left bare to the winter air. Under the wrappings, absorbent moss lined the frame, working like a natural diaper while adding insulation. Furs wrapped around the whole structure, sometimes tied with hide cords so no draft could get in. It was practical, yes, but also clever. That small stiff board kept the infant warm, dry and protected, even on nights when the cold rattled the very bones of the home. And then there is a quirky fact from some frontier accounts. In very cold nights, parents sometimes tucked heated stones carefully wrapped near the foot of the cradle board. Others say they placed the whole cradle board close to the mother's side, sliding it under the same covers, so her warmth went into the infant's cocoon. Imagine the odd sight of a stiff fur-wrapped bundle pressed right against its mother, both breathing together, two lives linked by the simplest of arrangements. But experts continue to argue over whether infants were always kept in cradle boards at night, or if in winter wrapping alone was more common. Some anthropologists say cradle boards limited movement, making it harder to keep a baby warm with shared body heat. Others say the careful layering and moss lining were exactly what made them safe in such climates. The archaeological record naturally leaves no baby bedding behind, and so the debate stays unfinished. You imagine the sensory details of such a scene. The mother's breath curls over the fur misting in the low firelight. The baby moves a little but no cry comes. The wrapping soothes. The warmth stays steady. You notice the faint smell of cedar bark woven into the wrappings, a touch thought to bring both health and spiritual protection. The cradle board itself leans slightly at an angle against the mother's bedding, tilted so the infant feels held as if still in arm. And beyond practicality, the cradle board carried cultural weight. It meant belonging. The child tied both physically and spiritually into the community. When the family lies down to sleep, they do so knowing the smallest among them is held safe against the winter. It is not just about survival. It is about trust, about the continuation of life, even when the night presses hardest. As you watch the mother settle back, her hand brushing gently across the wrapped fur, you feel a quiet settle in the home. The fire crackles, the hides move a little, but here in this corner, the quiet warmth of a newborn glows more powerfully than the flames, and you see that survival is not measured only in how adults last, but in how the most fragile lives are carried through the storm. Your gaze moves from the cradle board to the edges of the bedding, where movement stirs in the dim light. A dog stretches, shakes its fur in circles once, before curling back into a ball at someone's feet. Another lifts its head, ears twitching at the wind outside, then drops it again against the furs. You realize with a smile that even here in the bitterest season, dogs are not just guards or hunters. They are blankets. Historians point out that dogs were the first tamed animals in the Americas long before horses came with Europeans. For native families, they were friends, workers, and sometimes alarms. But on winter nights they served another key role, living heaters. Their thick coats bred to handle the cold gave off warmth that humans could borrow. People did not just allow dogs in the home. They welcomed them onto bedding, especially near children's feet. That warmth could mean the difference between shivering through the night and waking comfortable. There was a quirky fact recorded in spoken accounts. Some children had a favorite dog they insisted on sleeping beside, treating it like a personal heater. Parents allowed it, knowing the dog's loyalty and body heat. Both had their uses. One story even says that families joked about which dog was the warmest blanket, as if competing for the best spot by the fire. It turns the hardness of survival into something almost playful, where need meets affection. And yet experts still debate how big this role was. Were dogs always allowed to share bedding in every tribe, or was it more situational? Some anthropologists say worries over fleas or cleanliness may have limited this practice. Others say in the brutal cold practicality always won over concerns. The proof as usual is mixed, leaving the question open. Still, you can imagine the feeling clearly. The dog at your feet gives off steady warmth, its breathing slow and comforting. The faint smell of animal musk mixes with smoke and hide, earthy but oddly reassuring. The weight of its body pins the fur down, keeping drafts from sneaking under. You stretch your toes against its side and it moves closer, as if by instinct guarding you from the cold. Beyond warmth, there is friendship in this setup. Dogs were not just animals. They were part of the household, woven into the daily rhythm of survival. Their ears pricked at danger, their bodies warmed the bedding. Their presence gave a sense of security in the dark, out here in a world where wolves howled just beyond the circle of light. A dog inside the home was more than comfort, it was reassurance. The fire pots, the wind whines faintly at the smoke hole, but you hardly notice. Between fur's family and the steady warmth of curled dogs, the night feels less threatening. You find yourself sinking into that timeless bond, amazed that something as simple as a loyal animal could tip the balance between fear and rest. And so you drift, warmed not only by hides and fire, but by the steady breath of friends who never question their place at your side. Survival here was not solitary. Even the dogs helped carry it through the long frozen night. The dogs settle, the fire hums, and yet your eyes are drawn upward. Above, the glowing circle of flamed smoke gathers, in a wavering column slipping out through a hole. At the top of the home, you see this opening as no accident. It is the smoke hole, that strange balance between warmth and breathable air. Without it, the home would choke in its own haze. With it, the bitter air can creep in. It is a delicate balance argued about as fiercely in camp as it is among experts centuries later. Historians often say that smoke holes could be adjusted. A flap of hide could be tied open or closed depending on the wind, with poles used to change its angle. Families became weather readers of the night, listening to gusts by ear and instinct, adjusting the vent so smoke left without inviting drafts. You imagine someone stirring at midnight, pulling a cord to tilt the flap, muttering softly as they tried to please both fire and frost. There is a quirky fact from some spoken traditions. People told stories of spirits that rode the smoke, slipping through the hole to carry prayers to the sky. Children sometimes whispered wishes into the rising haze. Half game, half belief. The smoke hole was not just ventilation. It was a door, a bridge between worlds. To a tired child looking up in the dark, the glowing shaft of sparks might look like a ladder for ancestors. Yet experts continue to debate how efficient these openings really were. Some say smoke holes in buffalo hide homes let out too much heat to be truly effective, making insides far colder than memory claims. Others say proper angling and overlapping hides created a chimney effect that drew smoke up while reducing drafts. Archaeological data is scarce, and so the argument moulders unfinished. Much like the embers beneath you, you lie back studying the vent above. Cold air seeps a little along the edges, touching your cheeks, but without it the smoke would sting your lungs, blur your eyes, and make sleep impossible. The trade-off is unavoidable. Breathe easier and risk a chill, or seal tight and slowly suffocate. The people who lived here did not just talk, they adapted, moving hides as naturally as you might open a window. Your senses take in the detail. The faint glow of sparks rises through the smoke hole, bright against the dark sky beyond. The wind sometimes moans through the gap, a soft flute-like sound that twines with the fire's hiss. The smell of wood smoke clings to your skin, sharp but oddly comforting, as if reminding you are alive with each breath. It dawns on you that the smoke hole is more than building. It is compromise made real. Every winter home carried this small necessary weakness, an opening that could not be fully closed, a vulnerability that made life possible. And as you watch the sparks vanish into the night, you feel the strange reassurance of it, that survival is not about perfection, but about learning to live with small losses. You lie there under the quilts of fur, warmed by fire and by dogs curled at your feet, when suddenly the wind rises again. It hits the home with a force that makes the hide shake. The poles groan softly overhead. For a moment you are reminded that outside this fragile shelter stretches a plain of endless cold, and yet inside the storm takes on a different sound. It is muffled, softened, turned into something you can almost fall asleep to. Historians have noted how the sound inside a hide-covered home created a unique soundscape. Winds that would howl brutally in the open air drummed gently against the tough surfaces, turning violence into rhythm. The hides acted like a giant drum skin vibrating with each gust. For families huddled inside this steady beat became part of the night. Some accounts even call it comforting, a reminder that while winter raged outside the home was holding firm. There is a quirky fact in spoken lore. Children sometimes pretended the wind was a giant animal, pawing at their home trying to get in. They laughed at the thumps and flutters, turning fear into play. Parents encouraged these stories perhaps because they lessened the terror of storms that could last for days. You picture a little one giggling under the furs, whispering that the sky bear is scratching again. Yet experts still debate just how secure these homes were against the worst blizzards. Some say no matter how tight hides were outward, snow and wind always found a way in chilling the inside. Others say with enough layers and constant care, the homes were remarkably strong, keeping families surprisingly warm even in brutal conditions. The archaeological record leaves only post holes and burnt fire pits, so the arguments remain unresolved like the sigh of wind through poles. The sensory experience is clear. The wind outside roars, but here it becomes a muted heartbeat. Against the walls, the fire cracks, in answer offering its own rhythm. Together they form a lullaby of survival, the storm and the hearth singing together. You feel the vibration of each gust through the floor, a low thrum that travels up your spine, not frightening but grounding. It is the music of winter life, unavoidable, yet oddly reassuring. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with smoky air, and see how the sound changes your view of the storm. Outside you would hear chaos. Inside you hear persistence. The home does not silence the storm. It reshapes it into something survivable, even soothing. And as your eyes flutter heavy, you find yourself thankful for the steady drumming, a reminder that the world beyond may rage, but within these hides you are cradled in rhythm. The wind fades to a steady murmur, and with it your other senses grow stronger. You breathe in, and the night brings its own smell. Wood smoke thick and sweet, leather worn from firelight, dried meat hanging in strips giving off a faint savory scent. These are the smells of winter survival, sewn into the very fabric of the home. You can almost taste them on your tongue, layered like the hides overhead. Historians often remind us that smoke was not just a bother. It was preservation. Meats, fish, even berries were hung in the rafters, where the fire's smoke curled. The constant exposure dried them, kept off rot, and flavored them too. The home itself became both house and smokehouse, and the smell it stuck to everything. Clothes, hair, bedding, even skin. For people inside, it was the smell of comfort, of safety, of food waiting when storms made hunting impossible. There is a quirky little note from early European visitors who said native homes smelled so strongly of smoke and leather that they tasted it in their beards for weeks. Imagine stepping outside after a night here, carrying that scent wherever you went. For the villagers themselves, it was hardly noticed. just part of life as natural as the air itself. But experts still argue over how healthy this smoky world was. Did breathing with smoke all the time damage lungs over generations? Or did people adapt? Some say high death from breathing illness hints at the cost. Others suggest strength was greater than we think. Without medical records, it stays an open question, lingering in the haze above the embers. You close your eyes and let the scent fill you more deeply. Smoke curls into your hair, rich and resin-like. The hides around you give off an earthy musk, softened by age and youth. From the corner, a faint sweetness drifts. Perhaps dried berries hung in a pouch, their sugars caramelized by heat. The air is thick layered textured, every breath carrying the story of the home. For the families living here, those smells were not just background, they were reassurance. If the home smelled of smoke, the fire was alive. If it smelled of meat, there was food to share. If the hides gave off there, must the walls were strong, holding firm against the storm. Even your sense of smell became part of survival, part of the nightly check that told you without words that you were safe. And so you settled deeper under your fur's eyelids heavy, lungs filling with a rich smell of wood and hide. Outside the storm is Central's blank merciless. Inside the world is full, comforting, alive. It is not perfume in the modern sense. It is the smell of endurance of life that refuses to give up. Smells hang thick in the air, but soon another layer of the night's survival appears. Sound not from storm or fire, but from human voices. As the home quiets, you hear an elder begin to speak. The words are low, deliberate, the rhythm rising and falling, like the crackle of embers. Around you, children lean closer, eyes half closed but ears open. Stories fill the darkness as surely as warmth fills the firs. Historians say that storytelling was central to winter life. Long nights when work was done and storms kept families indoors became seasons of spoken history. Myths, family lines, hunting tales, trickster stories, all passed from voice to ear, making sure nothing important was lost. Survival was not only about body heat. It was about memory, identity, continuity. Without these tales, the cold nights would swallow more than warmth. They would swallow meaning. And here is a quirky little fact you might not expect. Some tribes believed children would sleep more peacefully if the last words they heard at night were stories of heroes or animals. Playful creatures like coyote or raven made perfect bedtime company. Imagine drifting off while someone describes raven stealing light from the sky, or coyote tricking stronger animals with his cleverness. Laughter mixed with yawns and dreams, picking up where the story ended. Yet experts still discuss how much of these tales were just for children and how much were a community lesson, disguised as entertainment. Were winter stories only to pass the time, or were they structured teaching moments? Some say they were memory tools to keep complex histories. Others claim they were deliberately moral. The line between fun and education blurs, as it often does. In spoken traditions, you listen more closely. The elder's voice hummed steady, the firelight flickering. Across lined features, hands moving slowly. Each pause hangs heavy in the air, filled with waiting. A child giggles at a familiar part of the story, and an adult shushes gently, though a smile touches their lips. The rhythm is hypnotic. The hush of voices, the occasional bark of a dog outside, the snap of resin in the fire. Your senses take it all in. The beat of the story seeps into your breathing, slowing your chest. The warmth of the bedding fuses with the warmth of words. You see how powerful this ritual was. Stories soften the mind, making the cold less sharp, the night less threatening. By the time silence returned, people were not lying awake, listening to the storm. They were already wandering the dream worlds the elder had opened for them. And so you let yourself drift, hearing a tale that is both ancient and immediate. A tale that turns the darkness itself into company. In this whole, winter nights are not empty. They are full of voices, memory, and the gentle magic of words that lull you into dreams. The elder's story fades, leaving behind a quiet as soft as the firs around you. Yet the home is never completely silent. From a corner comes the slow steady beat of a drum. Not loud, not ceremonial, but gentle like a heartbeat stretched into the night. Someone taps it idly, the rhythm slow enough to merge with breathing. Bodies adjust to exhale and begin to follow that sound into sleep. Historians note that rhythm played a role not just in ceremonies, but in everyday life. A drum's pulse, or even the repeated sound of someone humming, could help calm a restless night. The plains peoples knew that humans sink into rhythm. By matching breath and heart to steady beats, you could coach yourself and your children towards sleep. In winter homes where storms rattled the hides, and fear might otherwise keep eyes open, rhythm created peace. And then there is a quirky little detail. Some accounts tell of women rocking cradle boards against the floor in time with their own heartbeat. The babies were quiet, soothed by the combined thump of wood and flesh. Travelers sometimes mistook this for formal music, when in truth it was as practical as a lullaby. Imagine that sound, the soft double thud of a mother's chest and the cradle board against the earth, perfectly matched a simple yet deeply human metronome. Still, experts debate whether such night drumming was common, or just occasional. Was it a routine and nightly ritual in many homes? Or was it saved for restless evenings when storms howled too fiercely? Some researchers say continuous rhythm was central. Others suggest it is romanticized memory. The truth likely shifts, like the drum beat itself, sometimes steady, sometimes gone. Your senses lean into it. You feel the vibration more than you hear it. Low resonant moving through fur, hide and bone. It mixes with the crack of the fire and the faint moans of wind at the smoke hole. Your chest begins to match it. Breath deepening, shoulders loosening. The whole home breeze is one. A small community sinking into a beat as old as time. You let your imagination stretch outward. Perhaps in another home, nearby another drum hums. Another family drifts into rhythm. Across the camp, scattered circles of fire and hide. 100 small heartbeats join in an unseen chorus. The storm rages outside, but inside the night belongs to rhythm, to steady sound that softens the edges of fear. And, as your eyelids sag, you see this was part of survival too. Not just heat and height, but sound. A heartbeat carried into wood, a reminder that life continues. Steady and strong, even in the depths of winter. In that thrum you find comfort, and in that comfort you find sleep. The drumbeat fades, replaced once more by the quiet shifting of bodies under furs. The fire hums low, the dogs sigh, and yet within the stillness of the home there remains an invisible order, an arrangement that shapes where each person sleeps. You look around and see it is not random. Men lie closer to the walls where drafts may creep in, and where a listening ear can catch any sound beyond. Women and children gather in the heart, pressed close to the warm threat in the safest place. It is a pattern repeated across winters, written into survival itself. Historians often describe how different roles extended even into sleep. Among many plains tribesmen took the outer positions in the home, not because they were warmer, but because they could stand the cold. They absorbed the edge of the drafts, their bodies forming the first line of defense against the outside world. Women who cared for the children and tended the fires stayed toward the center where the heat collected. In this way, the very layout of rest mirrored the layout of life, each role fitting each sacrifice part of the whole. And there is a quirky little fact whispered in old accounts. Sometimes men teased one another about who snored loudest, claiming it helped scare away evil spirits, or even prowling animals. Imagine a family smiling as a warrior's loud snoring rattled the heights. Have fun, have reassurance. In a world where wolves howled beyond the firelight, maybe a good snore really did sound like protection. Yet, anthropologists still discuss how fixed these patterns were. Did all families strictly follow this placement, or did comfort often win out? Some evidence suggests the arrangement was flexible. Elders might be given the warmest place, or a mother with a newborn might sleep nearer the fire, regardless of usual roles. Others argue the arrangement held strong a nightly practice of community duty. The truth, as usual, may lie in the shifting lines of memory and circumstance. You take in the sensory detail of such a scene. To your left, a man moves, his outline silhouetted against the faint draught under the hide. His breath mists in the chill, but he does not wake fully. He has learned to bear that edge of cold. At your center, a woman pulls a fur tighter around two small children, her hand gently pressing their backs as if to remind them they are safe. Near the fire, another elder stirs, tossing a log onto the embers, with the instinct of someone who has done so 1,000 nights before. The arrangement is practical, but it is also deeply meaningful. The home becomes a small model of society itself. Men outward facing, ready for danger. Women inward, guarding the future. Children at the very core, the flame around which everything is arranged. In that circle you see not just survival, but philosophy. A living picture of how these people understood themselves and their world. Your imagination drifts further. You think of how different this is from the single beds and bedrooms of modern life. Your privacy dissolves into closeness. Every cough, every shift, every sigh is shared. The smell of one's skin becomes the smell of all. You cannot separate yourself from the others, nor from their roles. In this home you are one body with many parts, each keeping the others alive. There is an intimacy to this closeness that goes beyond warmth. Whispers travel easily in the dark, words exchanged softly as children doze. A husband leans toward his wife, murmuring something that makes her lips curl into a smile even as she pretends sleep. Across the home, a grandmother hums faintly, her voice so low it blends with the fire's crackle. The arrangement is not only defensive, it is deeply human, layered with affection and memory. And yet the expert's question lingers in the background. Was this rigidly set, or was it fluid like so much of life? Perhaps the arrangement changed night by night, storm by storm by storm. Perhaps the rule was less a rule and more a rhythm, flexible as breath itself. The proof isn't clear, leaving you with the picture, but not the certainty. You imagine the physical feelings of this placement. On the outer edge, the floor feels colder, and the hides flutter, more often with gusts of wind. Your shoulder brushes against the tough wall, vibrating faintly with each storm beat. Toward the center, the warmth grows thicker, layered by bodies as much as furs. The air is richer, heavy with smoke and breath. You move inward and feel your muscles release, the cold at your arms and legs easing. The contrast is sharp, a bodily reminder of why the arrangement mattered. And then there is the meaning again, pulling at you. In the heart of the storm, this small circle has drawn its own map of the world, its edges braced by protectors, its center holding the future. To live this way is to sleep each night inside a story of who you are and what you owe. Each body position is a promise whispered without words. I will guard you, I will keep you warm. I will see you safely to morning. Outside, the wind claws still walls pacing beyond the glow. But inside, the pattern holds night after night, generation after generation. And as you nestle deeper into your imagined place at the center, you feel the great comfort of that order. It is not a cage, not a restriction. It is a map of care drawn by need, lit by fire, remembered in warmth. The drumbeat may have faded, but the rhythm persists. In the breathing of the men at the edges, in the sighs of women holding children, in the steady rise and fall of warmth across the home, together they form a chorus of endurance, a living shield against the long winter night. And as your eyelids grow heavy again, you see that even sleep here is shared, even dreams are common. To drift away in this circle is to let go, trusting that others will hold the edges of the world until you wake again. The home's quiet now, the breathing steady, the furs heavy with shared heat. But beneath the stillness, hunger often stayed, gnawing at bellies through the long winter nights. Food was precious, and in the hardest seasons, survival meant making do with less than enough. You shift a little under the coverings, your imagination sliding into that reality, trying to fall asleep while your stomach twists and grumbles. The emptiness as sharp as the wind outside. Historians remind us that winter was the cruelest season for native families, especially on the plains. Summer hunts and autumn harvest filled stores with dried meat, berries, corn and squash, but deep snows often cut off hunting grounds and used up supplies. Starvation was not rare. Families learned to share, carefully measuring each portion, so food might last until spring. Sometimes this meant going to bed with only a few bites in your belly. You were not alone in that emptiness. Everyone felt it, even children. Hunger was part of winter's hold. And then there was a quirky fact worth thinking about. Some traditions spoke of fasting during harsh stretches, not only as need, but as a chance. A vision quest forced by hunger might bring dreams of guidance, spirit animals, or ancestors. A starving body was not just weak, it was also thought to be open to visions. So while some lay awake gnawing on despair, others whispered that emptiness could be a teacher. Imagine lying in the home stomach hollow, drifting into dreams vivid enough to feel like journeys, as though hunger itself pulled you into another world. Yet experts continue to wrestle with the question of how common such ritual fasting was in the dead of winter. Was it truly embraced, or was it making the best of scarcity? Did families encourage children to see hunger as sacred, or was it simply endured with gritted teeth? The research splits. Some accounts describe planned fasting ceremonies. Others suggest hunger was too brutal to be framed so neatly. The debate is unresolved. Like so much of winter life, half need, half meaning. You let your senses explore what it might have felt like. You taste the faint tang of dried meat lingering in your mouth, a piece eaten hours before. The smell of smoke, once comforting, now teases with a memory of food it kept. Your stomach growls loudly enough that you glance around, embarrassed, though no one stirs. Everyone else shares the same complaint. In the dark you rub your belly, wishing it quiet. The warmth of the furs cannot fill the emptiness inside. Still, there are acts of strength woven into these nights. A mother might give a child a roasted marrowbone to suck, not for food but for comfort. An elder might distract the young with a story, filling their imaginations with visions instead of food. And sometimes the act of simply lying close, sharing warmth, sharing breaths, often the edge of hunger. Misery divided is misery lessened. You can almost feel a hand squeeze your shoulder in the dark, wordlessly promising we will last until spring. A hunger sharpens your awareness. Every sound is louder, every smell more vivid. You notice the faint sweetness of berries stored in a pouch near the wall. You hear the crackle of the fire and imagine it as the snap of roasting fat, though no feast waits. You breathe in leather and fur, pretending for a moment it is roasted meat. Survival is not just physical, it is imaginative. The ability to bear what you lack by changing it in your mind. You drift into that half-dreaming state hunger brings. The fire's glow becomes a vision. You see by sun roaming endless fields, their bodies huge steaming in the frost. You smell roasting fat, hear the thunder of hooves, feel the fullness of a future hunt. Is this dream hunger's cruelty or hunger's gift? The line is blurred and you see that perhaps both are truth. Hunger weakens, but hunger also opens doors. Yet dawn always arrives whether bellies are full or empty. In the morning families rise slowly, joints, stiff, hunger heavier. Some get ready to risk the cold for hunting. Others share dried corn into a thin gruel. Children whimper, parents soothe. And the cycle of survival continues. Hunger does not vanish, but it is endured, woven into winter life as firmly as fire or fur. You return to your furs, stomach grumbling, and think about how different your own modern comfort is. You could reach for food with ease, but here the long night gives no relief. The lesson is humbling. Survival in the winter home was never guaranteed, even with fire and hides. It needed patience, sharing, and sometimes the willingness to dream through the emptiness. And so you curl tighter, acknowledging the hunger as part of the night. It sharpens, it softens, it teaches. The storm outside rages on, but in here, even with nothing in your belly, you hold on to the warmth, the closeness, and the stubborn knowledge that morning will come. The fire flickers low again, its light rolling shadows across the hides, and you notice something small yet clever. The bedding and coverings you rest under are not just made quilts. They are also the very clothes worn in the day. Heavy coats, leggings, cloaks, moccasins. All of it serves double duty. By nightfall garments become bedding, and bedding becomes garments again at dawn. Nothing goes unused in a world where resources are limited, and the cold waits for any chance to get in. Historians say that winter clothing among native peoples was far more than decoration. Coats lined with fur, leggings sewn from soft hides, cloaks made from feathered skins. They were essential armor. At night, these same items were not folded neatly aside. They were spread beneath sleepers as padding, or pulled over bodies as extra covers. A whole household might take off layers and lay them out like a patchwork mattress, then pull heavier cloaks over the top. What had served as defense against the snow by day became a cocoon of protection by night. And there is a quirky little fact kept in journals from early explorers. They sometimes mistook the piles of clothing and hides for mess, complaining that homes looked untidy. But those same people later admitted that families came out of such piles surprisingly warm and rested. What looked like disorder to outsiders was actually strategy. Each garment given a second job. Imagine tucking your fur-lined moccasins beside your chest, not because you feared losing them, but because their warmth helped lull you into sleep. Still, experts argue over how good this practice truly was. Could clothes designed for moving in the day really insulate as well as bedding made for sleep? Some say it was mostly extra clothing added when supplies ran low. Others believe this double use was standard. The line between clothing and bedding blurred almost completely. Archaeology offers only pieces, scraps of fur, bits of stitching, leaving much to guesswork. You picture the touchable reality of it. A soft coat still carrying the faint smell of smoke and sweat from the day's work is spread beneath you as a cushion. A cloak of feathers drapes over your shoulders, its shafts crackling softly as you move. Moccasins warm from the fire are tucked against your feet, turning into slippers for the night. The whole setup smells of tanned hiding with smoke, earthy but comforting, wrapping you not just in warmth, but in the familiar feel of daily life. It is intimate as end. Families did not own huge wardrobes. Garments were few and precious. That cloak you wore in the hunt is also the cloak your child pulls over herself in sleep. That coat passed down from grandmother warms her grandchildren through the night. Clothing here is shared fluid passed from body to body, changing roles with each hour. The very fabric of daily survival becomes the blanket of nightly rest. There is also something symbolic at work. Clothing carried status, identity, and sometimes spiritual meaning. Decorated with quills, beads, or painted patterns to sleep under, it was not only practical, but also protective in a cultural sense. The designs themselves, seen in the fire glow, may have offered comfort. Painted animals watching over sacred colors, reminding of strength. In this way, bedding became more than insulation. It became a shield of memory and meaning. The sensory details fold deeper into you. You feel the rough seam of a coat pressing into your cheek, the softness of fur brushing your neck. Your breath warms the feathers of a cloak, causing them to rustle faintly, as if alive. Each garment carries echoes of the day's effort, the hunt, the gathering, the chores. And yet, here they change, shifting from labor to comfort. You imagine to the practical acts. At night, clothing might be carefully placed, so dampness from snow could dry by the fire's warmth. In the morning, garments would be pulled back, or already warmed, ready for another day of facing the storm. Nothing was wasted, nothing idle. Every object in the home carried two lives, one for daylight, one for the night, and it strikes you as you drift further into this imagined warmth that survival was not only about inventing new things, it was also about bending what you already had too many uses. A coat is not just a coat. It is also a mattress, a quilt, a comfort for a child. A cloak is not just clothing. It is also a shield for dreams. The cleverness here lies in refusing to separate life into boxes. Day and night, blurred almond and bedding mix. Practicality and closeness weave together. Outside the storm claws still, but inside you are wrapped in layers that carry both memory and meaning. You feel the garments heavy on your chest, smell the smoke woven into their fibers, and see how smart the system truly was. No object lies still, everything works together, and so as your eyelids sag again, you learn a lesson whispered by centuries of survival. Sometimes the things that protect you by day must follow you into night, guarding not just your body, but your dreams. The night stretches on, and though the home feels like a cocoon, not everyone sleeps deeply until dawn. Someone always rises, not only to feed the fire, but to step outside. The entrance moves, cold air rushes in, and you hear soft footsteps crunch into snow. These are the moonlit patrols, the quiet checks that guard not only the fire inside, but the life of the camp beyond. Historians describe how men in particular took turns going into the darkness, making sure that ponies tied nearby had not wandered or been stolen. Horses were not simply transport, they were survival. Without them, hunting or moving camp would be much harder. A storm might scare them into running, or raiders might sneak close, hoping to cut them loose. And so while others slept, someone would wrap a cloak tightly, step into the bitter cold, and vanish into the night to walk around the herd. There is a quirky fact you might enjoy. Some accounts say these patrols were not always serious. Young men, restless under the furs, would sometimes welcome the excuse to get out under the stars. They might sing softly to themselves, talk to the ponies, as if to children, or even joke later that the horses were warmer company than the snoring uncle left behind. You can almost hear a muffled chuckle as a young man leans against a shaggy pony, the animal's breath steaming in the frozen air. Yet experts still debate how organized these patrols were. Were they scheduled like military watches, or more informal, handled by whoever stirred at the right moment? Some anthropologists say vigilance had to be strict, especially in areas where raids were common. Others suggest that in smaller, safer camps, patrols may have been casual. An elder taking a walk, a hunter restless before dawn. The proof is too broken to say for sure, leaving you to picture both possibilities. Strict watches in some places, quiet walks in others. You step outside in your imagination, following the patrol. The cold bites at once sharper after the home's warmth. Your breath plumes white into the night, and every sound is louder. The creak of snow underfoot, the soft whicker of horses, the distant crack of ice shifting on a river. Above, the moon hangs like a lantern, lighting the plain in silver. The snow glitters as if sprinkled with pieces of glass. It is beautiful, yes, but also dangerous in its emptiness. You walk among the ponies, their shaggy coats moving as they shift, their eyes reflecting faint light, watching you calmly. You reach out, touch one's mane, and feel heat beneath the frost. They are alive, warm, breathing, and you see their presence is a comfort, a reminder that not all warmth comes from fire. You listen for wolves, for raiders, for any sign that the night hides more than silence. The stillness presses vast and unbroken, until even your own heartbeat feels too loud. Then you return to the home entrance, closing behind you, carrying the cold with you for a moment before it fades back into warmth. The others move a little, but no one wakes fully. Your body aches from the brief time outside, but you know the patrol mattered. You know the camp breathes easier because you stepped outside. The sensory contrasts stay. The home is smoky, muffled, dense with people. The night is clear, sharp, filled with starlight, and the crunch of frozen ground moving between them is like passing between worlds. One fragile but warm, the other eternal but merciless. The patrol bridges them, making sure the fragile cocoon inside can last in the face of the vast cold outside. You imagine doing this night after night, year after year after year. Sometimes nothing happens, only silence and stories. Sometimes danger appears, wolves circling too close, horses restless with worry, a shadow on the horizon. That could mean raiders. The patrol is not glorious, but it is a needed part of the rhythm of winter life. and so you settle back into your furs warmed by the knowledge that while you drift towards sleep again, someone else has walked the edge, spoken softly to the ponies, and listened to the howls of the night. You see that survival was not only about what happened inside the home, it was also about those quiet steps in the snow, those moonlit moments when watchfulness kept the camp whole. The lesson presses gently against your thoughts. True rest is possible only when someone else is watching. And here in this ancient winter camp the balance is perfect. Half the world asleep, half awake, and all it bound together under the same silver moon. The patrol returns, the entrance closes, and the home breathes into stillness again. You shift under your furs, eyes half shut, and begin to notice how the night has its own inner world. Sleep here is not always dreamless. In the quiet of the firelight where smoke curls and bodies breathe together, dreams themselves become part of survival. They are not idle pictures but messengers, sewn into the culture as tightly as hides are sewn into the whole. Historians often note that dreams carried great meaning among many native peoples, especially during the long winters, when nights stretched endlessly. Healers, elders, and ordinary dreamers alike listened closely to the stories told by sleep. A dream could predict a hunt worn of sickness, or show guidance from the spirit world. In this way, the home at night was more than a shelter. It was a doorway. Families fell asleep not just into rest, but into another layer of existence where meaning waited. And there is a quirky fact from certain spoken traditions. Some people would try to shape their dream by sleeping with objects near them, stones, feathers, or small bundles of herbs. It was believed these items could invite specific visions. Imagine tucking a feather under your head and whispering a request to dream of birds, hoping for guidance on migration or weather, or putting a carved stone beside you asking ancestors to speak. In the quiet of a winter night, such rituals blurred the line between practicality and magic. Yet experts continue to argue over how literally these dream practices should be taken. Were they universal, followed by whole communities, or mainly the work of healers and vision seekers? Some anthropologists say everyone gave weight to dreams, weaving them into morning talks. Others believe the focus was narrower, saved for spiritual specialists. The debate remains unsettled, like the lingering haze of a half-remembered dream at dawn. You let yourself drift into such a dreamscape. Now the fire dims until its glow is no brighter than a heartbeat. Smoke swirls, and within it you see shapes. Buffalo with steaming breath, birds beating against the ceiling hides. Ancestors' faces shining like frost on river ice. A dream is vivid to dismiss, and you understand why it carried such importance. Dreams here are not entertainment. They are lessons carved into the night. Your senses deepen into the experience. You feel the heaviness of sleep pressing you down, but within that heaviness comes freedom. The cold outside vanishes, the storm no longer matters. Instead you walk in green fields, smell summer grass. Hear laughter, voices long gone. The dream offers escape from winter's grip, reminding you that warmth exists, that hardship is temporary. Perhaps this is why dreams were treasured. They gave not only prophecy, but hope. Others stir in their sleep. A child whimpers, faintly turning under the covers. A man mutters words you cannot catch, his brow furrowing, his dream pulling at him. In the morning such sounds might be shared around the fire, explained by elders or healers. Did the dream mean danger? Did it promise plenty? The very act of sharing kept the dream alive, weaving it into the fabric of community life. There is closeness in this as well. Imagine lying beside family members, hearing their sighs and whispers as they dream. You are part of their inner journeys, even if only as a listener. In this home, dreams are not solitary. They spill into the group, carried by breath and murmur. Just as warmth is shared, so too are visions. And yet you sense the darker edge. Not all dreams are comforting. Nightmares to come in the cold, sharpened by hunger and fear. Wolves appear in shadowy forms. Storms crush homes in terrifying pictures. For some these nightmares were a warning. For others they were spirits testing the mind. Even fear had to be honored, listened to, carried into the daylight for meaning. The The fire pops, waking you briefly from your thoughts. You blink at the glowing embers, then close your eyes again. The home hums with breath, the hides creak with wind, and you give in once more to the dream world. You understand now that in this culture, survival was not just about lasting physical night. It was also about listening to the unseen voices that came when your eyes closed. And so, in the depth of winter, you find that sleep itself becomes a bridge. On one side lies the harsh world of frost and hunger. On the other lies a realm where ancestors speak. Animals guide and visions soothe the unsurf. Both are needed, both shape the rhythm of life. Wrapped in hides warmed by family, you drift not just into slumber, but into stories that echo beyond the night. The dreams fade with the slow crawl of night, and when your eyes open again, it is to the faintest light seeping through the smoke hole. Dawn does not rush, here it seeps in thin and grey, softening the shadows inside the home. Your breath fogs in the cool air, and when you touch the hide walls you find them stiff with frost. The night's heat, though carefully guarded, cannot keep every corner warm. Thin crystals of ice sparkle where damp tears gathered and froze, glittering like fragile jewels in the first light of morning. Historians often describe this happening, frost forming on the inner walls of winter homes, the result of human breath, rising warmth and bitter cold meeting. Families would wait to see their shelters shining faintly, as if a hidden hand had painted them with silver. It was not simply decoration, though. It was a reminder of how close the cold always was, pressing in ready to take back the night of care lapsed. And there is a quirky little fact that some spoken traditions recall. Children often drew shapes in that morning frost, just as modern children doodle on fogged windows, little finger trails moving across the hides, circles, animals, even handprints. It turned the harsh proof of winter into a moment of play. Laughter rising in the smoky dawn. Imagine a grandmother scolding lightly while hiding a smile, saying the home was not a canvas, but secretly liking the way children left their art on the very walls that kept them alive. Yet experts still debate how bad these frosts really were. Were homes warm enough that only a thin rim of ice formed, or were insides so cold that frost coated every surface by dawn? Accounts vary widely. Some explorers wrote of homes surprisingly cozy. Others described them as nearly as cold as the outdoors once the fire burned down. Archaeology offers little clarity, leaving the question hanging like the crystals themselves, glimmering and fragile. You imagine the sensory experience of waking in such a place. Your breath makes little clouds with every exhale. The furs around you are warm, but your nose and cheeks tingle with cold. When you shift, frost falls in tiny flakes, dusting your bedding like powdered snow. The fire's embers glow faintly, sending up threads of smoke that catch in the early light. You reach to stir them, your fingers stiff, and the crackle of kindling is the first true sound of morning. The home comes alive slowly. A baby fusses and its mother lifts it from the cradle board, her breath visible in the dimness. Someone coughs into the smoky air a deep breath. After a night of breathing with fumes, Eamon groans rolling from the outer edge, where drafts chilled him most. Each body carries the mark of the night. Smoke in the lungs, frost in the hair, stiffness in the joints. And yet they rise alive. Another night survived. Your senses soak in the change. The crackling fire spreads warmth, then evenly at first, the air still freezing in the shadows. But soon the home feels more alive. The smell of smoke thickens again, layered with the faint scent of fat sizzling, as someone warms a scrap of meat. Children laugh at the frost patterns, tracing them with eager fingers. Dogs shake themselves, sending out puffs of frozen fur. Slowly the cocoon shifts from sleep to motion, getting ready for another day. There is meaning here too. The frost, though inconvenient, is proof of strength. It shows that people and fire together created warmth enough for dampness to form in the first place. Without life inside there would be no frost, only silence, emptiness, death. The very crystals shining on the walls are testimony. That breath was drawn, heat was shared, survival continued. and so use it rubbing the frost between your fingers, feeling it melt at once and think on the fragility of life in these winters. Every night was a contest between warmth and cold, and each morning's frost was proof that the fight had been fought and won. Even if victory was temporary, it was still victory. Outside, the snow stretches endlessly, the wind calmer, now the horizon pale with dawn. Inside, the home carries its own dawn, embers stirring, children giggling, frost turning to droplets as fire grows, and you see that the true wonder was not just surviving the night, but waking to see another morning shining off walls of ice that had not beaten you. The frost melts slowly as the fire revives, but even before breakfast begins, you notice something important about this space. No one is ever far from their tools. Within the dim light of the home, objects are placed with quiet purpose. Knives rest in sheaths beside bedding. A bow leans against a wall, arrows tucked neatly in a quiver. Within arm's reach, a sewing kit of bone needles and sinew thread lies near a grandmother's furs. It dawns on you that even sleep is never truly unarmed. Historians often point out that native winter homes doubled as workshops and armories. Weapons were not stored in some distant place. They lived beside their owners. If danger came in the night, whether wolves, raiders, or sudden fire, everything needed to respond was already close at hand. Likewise, the endless mending of clothes and hides did not stop for storms. Women might sew by the glow of embers late into the night, keeping children warm under the same covers, where tools clicked and threads pulled. The home was bedroom, kitchen, and workshop all at once. And here's a quirky little fact that makes you smile. Some travelers wrote that children sometimes played with tiny bows or carved dolls at bedtime. Their toys often smaller versions of the tools that parents used. A boy might fall asleep hugging a little bow carved just for him, while a girl held a small pouch of beads, practicing the skills she would one day master. Even in slumber, the rhythm of daily work seeped into the dreams of the young. Yet experts still debate just how heavily armed homes really were. Were full war bundles and spears kept inside at all times, or only smaller everyday tools? Some researchers say the largest weapons were stored together, while others argue families never let such essentials out of reach. Archaeology leaves us little beyond stone points and bones, and the written accounts vary depending on who watched. The truth may have shifted with circumstance. Times of peace allowing looser storage, times of threat tightening every precaution. You look more closely, and your imagination. The glint of a blade catches the firelight, its edge sharpened by careful hands. A spear lies beside a father's bedding, close enough to grab in half sleep. Across the home, a woman's pouch of needles rests open, bits of sinew thread shining faintly. These objects are not luxuries. They are lifelines treated with respect and practicality. Each family sleeps with survival at their fingertips. Your senses drink in the details. The smell of sharpened stone mixes with smoke, faint but distinct. The feel of polished wood smooth from use rests under your hand. A soft clink of beads comes as someone moves their pouch, rattling quietly. Every sound, every touch, every smell reminds you that this is not an idle resting place but a working one. A hub where survival hums even in darkness. There is intimacy in this arrangement too. Imagine lying down beside your bow every night, hand brushing its curve as you drift towards sleep. Imagine a woman mending a tear in a coat, while her child sleeps beside her, each stitch binding warmth and care. Tools here are not cold instruments. They are woven into family life, into nightly routine, into the very rhythm of dreams. And there is meaning as well. To keep a blade by your side at night is to accept that danger is never far, but it is also to say you are ready. To hold a needle in your pouch as you sleep is to say life continues, that tomorrow you will wake, mend and carry on. The presence of tools beside bedding is both practical and thoughtful, a statement that life persists, not just in warmth but in action. You picture how this would feel at dawn, Rising slowly would already have what you needed within reach. A knife to cut would a needle to patch hides a bow for the day's hunt. No frantic searching, no wasted motion. Everything woven into the same small space. That cradled you through the night. It is efficiency born, not of having less, but of need. And as you settle again under the furs, you see that even in rest survival never loosens its grip. The tools at your side are silent friends waiting with you, dreaming with you, ready to leap into use when dawn demands. The home is not cluttered, it is prepared. In this world, sleep itself is never separate from survival. The tools rest close, but not every object beside the bedding speaks only of survival. Some whispers is softer, warmer. As the fire grows stronger and morning edges nearer, you notice the figures curled together under a shared cloak. Their faces nearly touch, their laughter muffled under furs. So the children will not stare. Even in a world of ice and hunger, love sneaks into the home, bringing with it a different kind of heat. Historians remind us that closeness in winter life was not absent, but essential. Couples shared not only duties and food, but the very warmth of their bodies. They shared cloak, a layered coat spread over two fawns, became both blanket and bond. Within the tight space of the home, affection was no private luxury. It was woven into the rhythm of survival. Companionship soothed, steadied, and sometimes distracted from the cold pressing in at the seams. And here is a quirky fact passed down through some spoken traditions. Lovers whispered jokes or stories at night, stifling their giggles, so as not to wake the whole household. Children might roll their eyes, muttering about parents who talked too much. It became a game of sorts, the adults pretending secrecy, while everyone knew perfectly well what was happening. Under the shared furred, you can almost hear a muffled chuckle, a playful shove, the sound of warmth turning into laughter, even while snow screams outside. Still, experts debate the boundaries of closeness in such shared spaces. Were couples careful to hide affection, or was it accepted as natural in the tightness of winter homes? Some researchers say modesty was kept, while others insist privacy was a foreign idea put later by outsiders. The truth likely varied, shifting from family to family, night to night. In any case, warmth was shared and love was no less. To love endurance than firewood or fur. You let yourself imagine lying under that shared cloak. The smell of smoke stays in the fabric, but under it is another scent, flesh warmed by nearness, hair carrying traces of cedar or sweet grass. A hand brushes yours in the darkest squeeze of reassurance. Whispers murmur close enough that you feel breath against your skin. The cold still presses at the edges, but here at the core another fire glows, one of affection, of human connection deeper than need. It is easy to think of winter nights as grim, but here you see their tenderness. Couples exchanged promises in the dark, shared warmth when furs ran thin, and created spaces of laughter even when hunger gnawed. This was not only about having children, though that mattered for the survival of a people. It was about comfort, friendship, and the emotional fuel to endure. A community that could laugh and love together at night was a community that woke stronger in the morning. There is meaning here as well. Just as the fire needed constant tending, so too did relationships. Affection was another ember coaxed alive with whispers, protected with shared cloaks. The warmth of the home was layered. Hides and furs, fire and stone, bodies and laughter. Each layer mattered, each added its own kind of insulation against despair. Your senses linger in the moment. The sound of soft laughter melts into the crackle of logs. The touch of another hand is as reassuring as the weight of the quilts. Even the silence that follows carries meaning. The silence of companionship, of not being alone. In a world so hostile, this closeness feels revolutionary. And as your eyes grow heavy once more, you see that love here is not frivolous. It is survival in its gentlest form. It warms the body, yes, but also the heart. It offers strength to face hunger storms and endless nights. Under shared cloaks with whispered words and secret smiles, people lasted, not just because they had to, but because they wanted to for each other. The laughter softens, drifting back into the steady rhythm of sleep. And for a while the home is only breathing and firelight. Yet behind the comfort lurks the knowledge that winters could grow harsher than memory could recall. Whole generations lived through seasons that seemed determined to test the limits of human endurance. You shift in your bedding, picturing what it must have felt like when storms did not stop for days, when drifts swallowed the hound's holes whole, when the air itself seemed colder than bone. Historians point often to the 17th and 18th centuries, when North America shivered under what we now call the Little Ice Age. During these decades, winters deepened and the cold bit harder. For native communities already skilled at adapting, this meant doubling efforts. More hides sewn, more fires tended, more food dried and shared. Families told stories of winters so fierce that rivers froze solid to the bed, and bison wandered farther south than anyone remembered. To survive such years was not just impressive, it was extraordinary. There is a quirky little fact passed down through spoken memory. In some communities, children were told that the frost itself was a live, playful being who pressed its icy fingers against the home to test for weakness. Elders scolded children who left the entrance open, warning them that frost man would slip in and nip their toes. What might sound like superstition doubled as practical teaching. Close the entrance, guard the warmth you will invite in the cold itself. You can imagine a child squealing as an elder tapped their bare foot, laughing that frost man had found them. But experts still debate how bad the Little Ice Age truly was. For native populations, did it make death much worse, or did traditional knowledge protect communities against the worst? Some say records of famines, but just widespread suffering. Others insist that spoken history shows strength, with cultural changes strong enough to soften even the sharpest winters. The question stays unresolved, echoing like the howl of a storm that never quite fades. You lean into the sensory details of such a harsh season. The air inside the home feels colder despite the fire, breath misting even close to the flames. The hides stiffen with frost at night, crackling faintly when touched. Smoke clings more heavily to clothing, because fires must be kept larger and longer. Food stores shrink faster, forcing families to chew tougher dried meat, to stretch meals with thin broths, to endure hunger with clenched jaws. Sleep becomes lighter, interrupted by shivers, and the creak of hides under snow's heavy weight. And yet, even in such winters, life lasted. Families pulled their furs tighter, pressed closer and waited. The community itself was insulation. You imagine elders telling stories not just for comfort, but to remind the young that storms had been survived before and would be survived again. Memory was its own fire, warming spirits against despair. You noticed how the outside world pressed inward. Horses grew thinner, dogs searched desperately, and hunts became more dangerous. Snow deeper than a man's height buried trails and river crossings. Yet still the homes stood, their hides dark against the white, smoke rising like defiance into the frozen air. Each family inside represented a refusal, a whispered vow. We will outlast this night, we will outlast this winter. The meaning grows clearer the longer you linger in thought. The Little Ice Age becomes not just a weather time, but a test shaping strength and cleverness. Each generation carried forward not only stories of suffering, but also the tricks that worked. Piling snow against the home, sewing hides tighter, shearing smarter. Hardship became heritage, survival became tradition. Your senses lean into the lesson. You hear the howl of a storm that rattles poles like bones. You feel the cold biting, even through layered furs. You taste thin broth, smoke thick, stretching scraps into meals. And yet you also sense the warmth of family pressed close. Laughter forcing its way even through hunger. Stories refusing to let despair take root. And as you settle back, eyelids heavy again, you see that the miracle is not merely that people survived the worst winters history threw at them. The miracle is that they survived with memory, humor, affection, and identity whole. The home became not just a shield against cold, but a vessel carrying culture through the frost. In this way, each frozen season was not the end, but another layer of strength added to the story, and you feel that story curl around you like another quilt, whispering that no matter how bitter the storm, warmth can always be found if hearts hold close enough together. The memory of harsher winters stays, but as the fire burns steady, your mind drifts to another thought. Not every winter shelter looked the same. The teepee of the plains, sharp and pointed, is only one face of survival. Move eastward into the forests, and you would find wigwams, domed shelters woven from young trees and bark. Shift farther north and snow houses, or partly underground homes appear. Each design met the cold in its own way, and each told a different story about how native peoples adapted to winter's relentless grip. Historians often stress these differences. On the plains, teepees made of buffalo hides were light, movable, built to follow the herds. In the forests of the northeast, wigwams offered sturdier insulation, their rounded shape strapping warmth better, layered with bark and mats of reeds. Along the icy rivers of the far north, partly dug-out homes used the earth itself as insulation, keeping families warmer under thick sod or snow-packed walls. Geography shaped building, unbuilding shaped survival. Here is a quirky fact that might make you smile. Some explorers visiting the wigwams of the Algonquin peoples said they were so warm and tight that once wet, even when the snow lies thick outside. One person even claimed he had to step back out into the storm to cool off. Imagine that, complaining of heat in the middle of a blizzard, your breath steaming as you gasp for relief, in weather others could barely bear. It is a reminder that comfort is relative, and that native builders weren't asked at turning what they had into enough. But experts continue to argue about which designs were most effective. Did the MOV ability of teepees trade off too much warmth compared to the sturdier wigwams? Were partly underground homes better in efficiency, but worse in mobility? Some anthropologists say environmental conditions decided everything. No single design was best, but rather each was perfectly tuned to its place. Others still suggest that cultural traditions, not just practicality, played a big role in why people chose one from over another. You imagine now walking through such variety. Step into a wigwam and you feel the rounded ceiling, pressing the air downward, holding heat close. Bark panels creak softly under snow's weight, but the inside glows with steady warmth as smoke seeps through a hole above. Step back outside and into a teepee, where the tall angled walls pull smoke upward more easily, making the space airy but still protective. Then picture yourself going down into a partly underground home, where earthen walls block the wind entirely, leaving you in a hushed warmth that feels almost buried, like sleeping inside the earth itself. Your senses drift deeper. The wigwam smells of cedar, bark and damp earth, its mats woven with reeds still faintly sweet. The teepee carries the musk of hide smoke curling steadily from its top. The partly underground home is quiet as still. It's a heavy and still the faint tang of soil mixing with fire's resin. Each shelter gives its own kind of cocoon, its own way of saying, here you are safe for the night. And yet the meaning runs through them all. Whether domed, pointed, or buried, each structure shows how humans read their environment like a book. Trees became bark and frames, buffalo became hide. Earth itself became wall. Winter was not beaten by one invention, but by many, each a reflection of place, tradition, and cleverness. The homes are not just shelters, they are ideas and would heighten snow. You picture families moving between these worlds, trading, visiting, sometimes adopting one another's practices. Perhaps a plains traveler was amazed at the sweaty warmth of a wigwam. Perhaps a woodland visitor stared upward at the elegance of a tall teepee. These contrasts were not rigid divisions but conversations in building, whispered across the land in the language of survival. And so you lie back again in your imagined home, warmed by hides, but with your mind wandering into domes, dugouts, and earthen walls, each design different yet all answering the same unyielding question. How do you sleep through a night so cold it could end you? The answer, you see, is as varied as the land itself. but always rooted in the same unbreakable will to endure. The fire burns brighter now, smoke winding lazily upward, and as you sink deeper into thought, you remember how these homes must have seemed to outsiders. The first Europeans stumbling into villages midwinter, expecting misery and instead finding warmth. Their writings often show shock, even disbelief. The people living without stone houses or chimneys could live through blizzards in comfort. To those unused to such structures, the insides seemed impossibly efficient, almost magical. Historians point out that journals from 17th and 18th century explorers and missionaries are full of surprise. Men who arrived wrapped in wool cloaks often entered tipis or wigwams, shaking with cold only to discover insides far warmer than their own rough cabins. Some admitted that native homes worked better than European shelters of the same time. Smoke left better warmth, gathered more efficiently, and the spaces felt more alive. You can almost picture an officer stamping snow from his boots, muttering that his own men froze nightly in drafty forts, while these people, as you dismissively call them, slept snug. And here comes a quirky fact. One French missionary complained that his hosts insisted he remove layer after layer of his European wool, because he was sweating like a pig inside the home. He noted that the family laughed at him, amused that the stranger could not take comfort. The irony drips from the page, an outsider brought to shame, not by cold but by too much heat, in a place he assumed unlivable. Still, experts argue about how true these accounts are. Were Europeans exaggerating, eager to romanticize, or were they playing down discomfort to highlight their own toughness? Some historians say these reports are colored by cultural bias, while others see them as honest amazement. The truth is tangled, as it often is when cultures meet. Part admiration, part misunderstanding, part looking down. You let yourself picture the moment more vividly. A traveler stumbles inside, face raw from wind, cloak crusted with snow. He blinks in the smoky glow, wiping tears from stung eyes. Around him families sit calmly, children drowsy in furs, dogs snoring softly. The contrast is staggering. His body aches from exposure while his rests in steady warmth. He tries not to shiver, tries to keep dignity, but the relief floods his bones so quickly he nearly cries. What must it have felt like to realize that survival here was not a miracle but a skill? The sensory differences leap at you. Outside, snow-blinding wind clawing every breath like glass. Inside, fire crackling hides, muffling sound, warmth pressing into skin. The smell of resin, meat, leather, dense, earthy, alive, contrasting with the sterile chill of the wilderness beyond. For an outsider used to stone walls that leak drafts, this home would have felt like another world. It is worth thinking on the meaning to the gritty, the uncertain. To step into a native home as an outsider was to step into a philosophy strange to European eyes. Here warmth did not come from big stonework or iron stoves, but from balance hide with snow and bodies woven together. The efficiency was born not from wealth or technology, but from close knowledge of place. To Europeans who value permanence and grandeur, such flexible, movable, deceptively simple shelters seemed uncanny. They underestimated until frost reminded them of their own weakness. And there is another layer, the quiet humiliation of discovery. Many Europeans prided themselves on civilized superiority, yet they found themselves learning to survive from those they dismissed. Some borrowed tricks, insulating with furs, piling snow, tending fires and terms. Others resisted, insisting their own methods were better, even as their men froze. The contrast between stubborn pride and quiet adapting must have played out many times under the howling winds. You can imagine the talks that followed. Around a smoky fire, a missionary writes in his journal about the idleness of people who lounge in warmth, forgetting that his own face still burns from frostbite. A soldier draws a tipi in his notebook, convinced it is unworthy, compared to a wooden cabin, even as his toes thaw thankfully. These contradictions fill the accounts, showing as much about outsiders' biases as about native life. Yet through all the words, one fact rings clear. People here knew how to turn the harshest environment into a home, and Outsiders might misunderstand, might argue, might even mock, but they could not deny the truth of what they felt when they stepped inside. Warmth, safety, survival. Your senses settle again into that warmth. You hear the crackle of wood, the laughter of children, amused by the foreign guest's discomfort. The soft rustle of hides as a woman fixes a seam. The storm outside fades to a dull whisper. For a moment you feel both views. The awe of the outsider and the calm skill of those who call this home, home, home. And as you sink deeper into your bedding, you see that survival here was not just a matter of lasting the cold. It was a matter of turning need into comfort, of making the impossible feel ordinary. What outsiders saw as marvel, the people inside saw simply as life, and that quiet difference is perhaps the most powerful lesson of all. The outsider's amazement stays in your thoughts, but soon your mind shifts toward the lasting puzzles of these homes themselves. You have spent the night surrounded by hides, fire and breath, imagining how warmth might have lasted. Yet not every detail is sure as sure. Even now experts debate how effective these shelters truly were. Did they keep families cozy through the worst storms? Or were they drafty, smoky compromises that needed constant fixing? The proof remains as hazy as the smoke curling above the fire. Historians present one picture. Buffalo hide tipis carefully sewn and angled. Good trap, surprising warmth. Families clustered close, fire tended constantly. Hides patched and doubled when needed. Spoken traditions describe them as snug, efficient, almost perfected through centuries of practice. But then the archaeological record complicates things. Post holes and burn turf show fires, yes, but not always clear traces of how thick coverings were, or whether smoke holes let out a well. Doubting voices suggest these homes may not have been as comfortable as memory claims. And then comes a quirky fact stuck in old missionary reports. Some outsiders noted that when homes filled with too many people, dampness dripped from the ceiling, making bedding wet. One priest wrote that he woke to find icicles hanging from the inner poles. Was he exaggerating for drama, or was it true? Families themselves likely managed such problems with skill, adjusting flaps, shifting bedding, drying hides by the fire. But the image of waking under wind or icicles is vivid enough to stick in the mind. The debates go on. Some anthropologists say hides lose efficiency as they age, stiffening and cracking, allowing drafts to creep in. Others say constant care kept homes surprisingly draft-proof, with women tightening seams on adding fresh skins as needed. Still others point to the role of shared body heat, suggesting that warmth relied more on numbers than on building. Was the home itself warm, or was it the people inside who created the climate? The line between shelter and society blurs, leaving experts chasing an answer they may never fully catch. You let yourself sink into the problem as if it were a mystery to solve. Imagine yourself measuring warmth at different spots. Close to the fire, at the walls, under the bedding. Near the fire, heat prickles your skin. A few steps away, your breath fogs. By the walls, drafts slick your shoulders. Yet under the furs of the home's heart, warmth collects thick as honey. Perhaps the truth is layered like this. Not uniformly cozy, not wholly drafty, but a shifting balance where comfort depended on placement, maintenance, and watchfulness. Your senses heighten as you picture it. The fire's glow warms your cheeks while your back chills faintly. With each gust against the hide, you pull the furs tighter, pressing into the body beside you. And at once the balance dips again, warmth flows back, drafts forgotten. It becomes clear that effectiveness cannot be judged alone. It was not just hides of fire or quilts. It was all of it together, plus the closeness of bodies and the watchful hands adjusting seams. A living system, not a still structure. And this perhaps is the heart of the expert puzzle. Modern people want exact measurements, numbers of temperature and insulation. But survival here was not mathematical, it was felt. What mattered was not whether the home reached 60 degrees or 30. What mattered was whether the family inside woke alive, with enough warmth to move, enough strength to carry on. Comfort by our standards was irrelevant. Endurance was the only measure that mattered. There is meaning in this debate as well. The uncertainty mirrors the fragility of memory itself. What one generation recalls as warmth, another recalls as hardship. The truth may lie in between, like the flickering light of a fire that seems bright until a draught makes it putter. Experts argue that the people who lived these winters knew the odds firsthand. It was never perfect, but it was enough. You think again of those outsiders shivering in their wool, astonished at the snugness of a home. You think of missionaries grumbling about smoke and damp. Both are true in their way. The homes were hovels and they were imperfect. They were warm havens and they were smoky caves. They were both salvation and struggle, just as all shelters are when the world outside is trying to end you. Your senses take in this paradox. The fire warms your palms, yet your toes ache with cold ache. The hides block the wind, yet smoke stings your eyes. The bedding cradles you in softness, yet hunger gnaws at your belly. Each element is both gift and challenge. The home is not flawless, but it works. And in that working lies its true genius. Not comfort, but survival. As you curl tighter under your furs, you see that the expert debates do not need neat answers. The arguments themselves reflect the complexity of winter life. Was it warm sometimes? Was it cold also? Yes. Did it work? The proof lies in the generations who endured, who dreamed, who whispered stories by firelight, who woke each morning to frost on the walls but life in their lungs. And that you think, as your eyes close again, is the only verdict that matters. These shelters may leave experts puzzled, but they left families enlivened in the long winter nights of history. That was triumph enough. The arguments of experts fade as the night reaches its final hours. The fire, though low, glows with a steady heart, embers pulsing like veins of molten earth. Around your bodies are still breathing, sighing, wrapped in fur. Dogs twitch. In dreams a child murmurs faintly, soothed by a mother's hand, even in her sleep. The storm outside has softened to a hush, as if the world itself has given up for a moment. You see, you are listening, not only to a single night, but 2 centuries of nights lived and lasted in just this way. Historians tell us that generations were raised inside these fragile circles of warmth. Infants were wrapped, children grew, elders told stories. Couples whispered, warriors rose for patrols. All within hides and poles, smoke and snow. The home was not simply a shelter. It was a continuity, a vessel that carried culture through winters that might otherwise have erased it. In every flicker of flame and every seam sewn tight against the wind, survival became tradition. And here was a quirky fact that stays sweetly. Some families believed the last ember of a fire held a spirit that must never die. At dawn, someone would scoop it carefully into a pot or bark bundle, carrying it to relight the day's flames. To let it go out completely was to risk bad luck. Imagine waking to see a grandmother bent over, whispering to a tiny coal as if coaxing a child, then feeding it twigs until it breathed back into flame. Fire was not just useful, it was family. Still, experts debate how permanent these winter homes truly were. Were they taken apart and rebuilt each season, or kept around in cycles of use? Some say mobility defined plains life, with homes moving often with herds. Others say winter villages were semi-stable, returned to year after year in familiar valleys or river bends. The archaeological traces, rings of post holes, charred layers of hearth, hint at both. The uncertainty is fitting, for winter life was fluid, adapting to what each year asked. You let your senses drink in this final scene. The fire's embers glow steady red gold veins under black ash. The hides smell thick of smoked leather and the faint musk of fur. The warmth of body stays heavy and reassuring, pushing back against the brittle cold that waits just outside. In your imagination you reach a hand toward the wall. Feel the hides chill, then pull back to the cocoon of blankets. You breathe in the air as dense with survival itself. There is meaning in these lasting embers. They are the last defense of the night, but also the promise of dawn. They connect yesterday's fire to today's, yesterday's life to tomorrow's. In them you see the persistence of culture, the refusal to let want slip away. No matter how long the winter, they glow like memory, like heritage, like defiance itself. Your thoughts stretch wider. These people lasted, not because their homes were perfect, but because they were adaptive. They turned snow into insulation, fire into kin, hides into walls, stones into silent radiators. They wove practicality with spirit, folding dreams and duties together until they became inseparable. What looks to modern eyes like hardship was also cleverness, and what appears fragile was in truth strong. You close your eyes again, listening to the last murmur of logs shifting. The home hums like a great breathing body. Its walls, the ribs, its fire, the heart, its people, the lifeblood. Outside, the storm waits for another chance. Inside, warmth holds on, quiet but unbroken. And so the night passes as it has passed for countless generations, carrying life forward through cold that should have ended it. And now, as the story draws to its close, the pace begins to soften. You have walked through long nights on the plains. You have curled under hides and furs. You have felt the bite of frost and the relief of firelight. You have shared in the rhythms of patrols, the whispers of lovers, the laughter of children, the dreams of healers. You have listened to the home itself breathe, walls trembling with wind, embers glowing like quiet stars. Let your body relax into that picture one final time. Picture yourself lying back inside a circle of warmth, the cold kept outside by nothing more than hides, fire, and closeness. Hear the muffled sigh of the storm beyond, reduced to nothing more than a lullaby. Smell the faint traces of wood smoke, leather, and snow melting into droplets on the hide. Feel the heavy quilt of fur pressing over you, the weight of centuries of survival curling around your shoulders. Notice how each detail, once a matter of life or death, now lulls you toward rest. The fire's glow softens your eyelids. The steady breathing of those beside you steadies your own. Even the distant memory of hunger or frost has been turned into reassurance. The knowledge that people found ways to endure, that warmth always returned. So let the last embers guide you. Imagine them glowing brighter, then dimming slowly, until they become a single point of light in the dark. With each breath, they fade gently, until nothing is left but calm. You are safe, you are warm. The storm outside cannot touch you, hear it? Drift now into your own dreams, carrying with you the quiet strength of those who once lay in winter homes, who kept the fire alive through the longest nights. Sweet dreams.